Tina Carragher of the First Seventh-day Adventist Church in Springfield, Tennessee. And with me is Pastor Dr. Abraham Jules, the preacher of preachers. He's from the Community Worship Center in Jamaica, New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm so glad, Pastor Jules, do you want me to call you Pastor Jules or Dr. Jules?
You can call me anything you're comfortable with. That's fine. I have no preference.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I don't want to disrespect the bishop.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not a problem.
All right. Well, the reason why I wanted to interview you, Pastor Jules, is because our church is experiencing quite a shift under this quarantine, this coronavirus situation. And being that you're a pastor and a preacher and a well-known preacher, I wanted to ask you about preaching and liturgy. And the reason why I wanted to ask that is because prior to us being under quarantine, church service would start at 11 o'clock. You probably get to the sermon by 12:30, 12:45, 1. And then the preacher gets up there trying to preach. Everybody's already been exhausted from everything else. And then you really want them to hear the word, but there's already been like 2 hours worth of worship service. And then we come under quarantine, right? So we lose all of those preliminaries. We lose all of the praise and worship sets. We lose children's story. We lose intercessory prayer. And the preaching of the gospel has now become like the central thing. And so what I want to ask you is, what are your thoughts about the placement of the sermon in the worship service? What should the priority be in the worship service?
Well, Pastor Carragher, thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. I believe that in this time, as you said, there is a shift, but we are writing this playbook as we are in the middle of the game. And so in many ways, it's an experimental undertaking in many, many ways. We try things and see whether they succeed or not. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you say our liturgy and the place of preaching and some things that we were doing prior with no audience and no personnel, a lot of that has changed. So I find myself, my church service, we would probably end like at 1:30 and everybody's happy, we've had a great and grand time. But now by 12:15, I'm done preaching after we have taped the service. Well, we stream our service live every Sabbath, but I don't have the personnel, and I've had to cut back on some things that we did in our worship. I've tried to add some things, however. The first couple of weeks, all I did was just got up, welcomed people, prayed, and preached and did a benediction. But more people are coming on, so I've tried to make it more as normal as can be for them. So we have a welcome. I have them do the welcome. We tape them doing the welcome. We played in the service. We have them doing the scripture reading and the music and those kinds of things. But we have to rethink a lot of things, especially our worship, because it has to become very meaningful at this time. Now, my daughter is 16 years old, Pastor, and for the first time, and she's heard me preach her entire life, first time in my life, my daughter came to me. She was home 2 Sabbaths ago, and I preached a sermon on the second coming of Christ. And she said to me, "Daddy, would you sit with me and teach me the doctrines of the church, please?" Now, and that's only because I've been preaching lately the doctrines of the church because of the times that we're in. I said that to say that really, I mean, when you asked the question, you included this in it. You said that the people are more interested in the preach word. And that has been my experience, that when we have these services, the preach word trumps everything else. I have a belief that it has to do with the times in which we're living and what people are going through.
So then what do you think, because in speaking with, some colleagues in my conference, we've been discussing, we've been appreciating the fact that, there aren't a whole lot of preliminaries now, and we can just kind of get to the word. But then there's going to be that transition when our church is finally opened back up again. What what really, so like when we're go through the schooling process, we are told and taught that being a preacher of the gospel is the highest calling that anybody could have. And so, but yet what our worship services haven't really totally reflected the preaching as the highlight. And so now it's central focus. When we come back into our churches, what place in the worship service should preaching have? Should our services be a little bit more streamlined so that we cut a little bit of the fat to get to the meat of it all, or what do we do?
Well, I think it is almost required of us when we go back to streamline, and not necessarily because we want to cut the fat out.
Mm-hmm.
It will be based upon necessity, and that is when we go back to church, more than likely we will be going back to churches where, for instance, in my church, I will not be able to accommodate the people who come to my service.
Mm-hmm.
I will have to have them sitting 6 feet apart.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, my attendance for my worship will be cut in, we'll have about 25%
Mm-hmm.
of the people that come,
Mm-hmm.
which necessitates me now having 2 and 3 services to accommodate all the people who come to my worship.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, more than just streamlining,
Mm-hmm.
we will have to streamline the service, have shorter services in order to have 2 and 3 services.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that will be the case. Now, streamlining is always good. I think sometimes we do a little too much, but I know in Black worship, we do
Mm-hmm.
more. I preach in white churches, Black churches, Hispanic churches, every white folk operate differently in their worship. Black folk, we are into the fellowship and the joy that comes from worship. We don't want to rush it,
Mm-hmm.
and I personally enjoy that much better.
Uh-huh.
But we will have to streamline. Maybe not for the reason that most people will think because we've gotten used to this, but
Mm-hmm.
because of necessity. At least, and let me speak. It may be contextual in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily in New York, where I know they will be demanding that of us.
Mm.
I pastor a church in Queens, New York, which is the epicenter of this virus in the
Yeah.
world.
Yes.
We have more people than anywhere else in the entire world. My church is in Queens, New York.
Mm-hmm.
So we will have to be doing that for those reasons I mentioned.
Okay. So how has the content of your preaching been affected by what's happening right now in our country?
It has been affected, and it has because when you're a pastor, as you know, Pastor Carriger, your people, when
Mm-hmm.
they talk to you, you can sense needs,
Mm-hmm.
and our preaching should also reflect that we understand the needs of our people. Well, my people have informed me in a million ways and others, and not only my congregation, but many who listen to us on the internet and follow our live stream and our other services. Their comments to us have been that they want to learn more about the prophecies of the Bible, Daniel, and the Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So on this coming Sunday night, I begin a 2-week revival for the First Church in Washington, D.C. It's all prophecy and preaching. That's because that's what they're asking for at that church.
Mm-hmm.
When I end that, I go to Chicago Independence Church and preach 2 weeks of prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking for that. But back to my local church,
Mm-hmm.
and back to answer your question specifically, my people have become much more involved in studying the prophecies and
Mm-hmm.
asking questions of me. I had a young lady 2 nights ago called me to explain Revelation 4 and 5 to her about, she wanted to talk to me and ask questions on it.
Mm-hmm.
And a young woman, she's a college student.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is in a Bible class now with some of her friends at church, and they are talking about prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened in the last couple of weeks, this coming Sabbath, I'm going to preach a sermon on the mark of the beast and the mysterious number 666.
Mm-hmm.
For many Adventists, we assume as pastors that our people know these things, but they don't.
Mm.
And we are not challenged by it as much as we should because we know it. But
Mm.
when we preach it, I preached on Armageddon in the 7 aspects 2 Sabbaths ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my guy told me we had over 6,000 people who listened to that sermon because it was a teaching sermon.
Mm.
And whenever we teach the prophecies or preach it, our people, especially in these times, I believe, they are much more attuned to it.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've been doing more preaching under this quarantine, perhaps, than before the quarantine.
Well, but I always preach a lot. I travel a lot, but
Yeah.
now I'm staying at home and doing all of this.
Yeah.
So everybody is getting away like bandits. It doesn't cost them any plane ticket, hotel fees, or anything. I just sit them, and I like it because I'm home. I don't have to
Yeah.
leave my wife and kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So let
yeah.
me ask you this: you mentioned prophecy, and I've heard that being brought up many times. So would you say that now then is the time for us to be doing more prophetic preaching, more, Revelation and Daniel, more the three angels message, more that type of preaching?
I would not want to dictate it to preachers. I think your context may determine it. I know for me,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what is going on has drawn me to it based upon my context and
Mm-hmm.
who I preach to. And because I preach to a wider audience every Sabbath, we get a lot of comments. And my media guys come tell me, Pastor, they said such and such.
Mm-hmm.
And I sense that our people around the world who listen to us,
Mm-hmm.
they are indeed being drawn to the prophecies because of the times in which we're living. And this pandemic has woken up a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, is this the end of time? Is this an omen of things to come? Is this one of the plagues? That's why I preached a sermon on the seven last plagues. There were a number of people who were telling me this is one of the plagues. So I went and explained it out of Revelation chapter 16 and preached a sermon on Armageddon and the seven last plagues.
Mm-hmm.
And thousands of people listened to that sermon because I think we should always preach those things because it's part of our core teachings.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a pastor, I believe I haven't done enough of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure other pastors can say the same. I
Mm-hmm.
do more because I'm an evangelist, so I
Mm-hmm.
tend to preach it when I do evangelism. But
Mm-hmm.
at my local church, I think I have not done enough. And I personally am enjoying studying and preparing for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy delivering it because I preach it. I just only teach it. I get all into it. And so it helps me as a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned the combination of being a preacher and an evangelist. Now, there are some people who have the perspective that evangelism is only for a certain time, certain occasion, whereas Black pastors basically we are conditioned to understand that we are the preacher evangelist.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And so, especially in the times that we live in, what would you say to, let's say, a younger pastor who has been conditioned to only view pastoral ministry as pastoral ministry and then bring in the evangelist? What would you say to them right about now?
Some years ago, I think it was about 1995, I wrote an article in Ministry magazine on evangelism. They'd asked me to do that. And one of the things I stated then in that article was that evangelism is not seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you as a pastor see evangelism as a seasonal or an annual event,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to miss the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism is what we do 365 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I do pastoral evangelism every single Sabbath I preach. Every Sabbath I preach, I'm doing pastoral evangelism. Every time I stand at the door and shake hands, I'm doing evangelism because I'm looking for new faces.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get their names and their telephone numbers. If they're new to my church, I want to be able to call them during the week and say, I was happy you were at my church Sabbath. This is my name. This is my number. Keep it. My name is Pastor Jules, and I want you to know that I'll be happy to be in touch with you, answer your questions, pray for you.
Mm-hmm.
I do evangelism at the door. I go downstairs into our banquet hall and we are having a lunch. I do evangelism again.
Mm-hmm.
I go to every single table
Mm-hmm.
and greet every member of my church and every stranger and welcome them to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't know them, never met them before, I take their names and numbers. I call them during the week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing evangelism.
Yeah.
I'm doing evangelism in my church every Sabbath. Every time I meet somebody, I'm doing evangelism because I'm always thinking souls and growth.
Mm-hmm.
So you ask the question, and it's a pertinent question you ask.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism is not seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism is not an event.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So our churches aren't totally quite open yet. And yet,
Uh,
as pastors, we still have an obligation to our churches, our church members. How can we, what have you found to be an effective way of still being able to keep contact with members in spite of not being able to touch them physically in person?
I I call my members
Mm-hmm.
every week. I call about 25 of them
Mm-hmm.
just to say hi
Mm-hmm.
and to pray for them
Mm-hmm.
every week.
Mm-hmm.
So some days I'll do 5, some days I'll do more, but at least 25 members. In addition to returning all my members' calls. If my members call me, I return their calls. If they text me, email me, I do that 100% of the people who contact me.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my ethical things I do. I will always return a call, return an email. Somebody wants to talk to me. That's one way. Your members should always feel safe as a pastor
Mm-hmm.
that they will call you and they will get a response. They
Mm-hmm.
will reach out to you and get a response.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I do, I do prayer meeting on Zoom, like many of us are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I do funerals. I do it on Zoom
Mm-hmm.
or FaceTime, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I go to my church every Sabbath. I drive. I live about 2 hours away from my church. I drive to my church every Sabbath. I
Mm-hmm.
stream our services
Mm-hmm.
live to
Mm-hmm.
give a little normalcy to my members.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to them every Sabbath when I get up, it says, if you need me,
Mm-hmm.
call me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're never bothering me. Many times our members call us. This is what they say. This is what they say. Pastor, I don't want to bother you, but I need. And I say, you never bother me. Anytime you need me, you call me. You are never bothering me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you make your members feel. And our members, Pastor Carragher, at this time,
Mm-hmm.
they need us more than ever before. I get more calls from my members during this season than any other time in my entire ministry.
Mm.
In my entire ministry.
Wow.
Because the people are fearful. The people don't know what's going on. They're hurting. They have people in their families, their friends who are dying, who are sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot they're going through emotionally. But
Mm-hmm.
I make myself available and
Mm-hmm.
accessible at all times to my members.
Mm.
And that gives them a certain amount of assurance.
Mm.
And I do that even before now. I'll be in Africa preaching, and I'll get back to the hotel, and I will return every call from Africa to the United States every night.
Wow.
Everybody who leaves me a message.
Wow.
Because my members should never feel I'm busy doing other things other than taking care of them.
Wow.
They must never feel that way.
Uh-huh. I bet you win Pastor of the Year award every year at camp meeting.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think that's just what we owe our people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the least we can do for them.
So what advice would you give to pastors moving forward? Once this thing is over, we're moving into the next phase of what ministry is going to look like. What, with all the things that you've seen in Adventism through your career and even moving forward, what advice would you give to pastors?
Well, it's going to be a different church for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Our churches are not going to look like they looked before.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a whole lot of changes in terms of formatting our worship and our ministries.
Mm-hmm.
While our worship together may be diminished to some degree in terms of the time and the content and context, I think there's a great opportunity. Our community services
Mm-hmm.
and the need for that will be increased and enhanced greatly.
Mm-hmm.
The church can become even more relevant post-COVID-19
Mm-hmm.
in terms of community service. And this is one area where the Adventist Church, I as a pastor, I have failed and our church has failed in terms of impacting the community. Now, we are great at worship and preaching and music,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but we are not great at being a presence in the community for non-Adventists, for the community members,
Mm-hmm.
that when they have needs, they don't run to our church.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come to us
Mm-hmm.
because we have never made an impact on them in the community as if we love and care for them.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean we don't, but we are great at worship. I think post-COVID-19, I may be wrong, but I just think there's an opportunity for ministry.
Mm-hmm.
This coming Sunday, I'm having testing at my church for COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing testing, and so we're going to be in the community. and people will be coming to us. We have about 1,200 kits, so
Mm.
we'll be testing about 1,200 people
Mm-hmm.
uh, this Sunday. Here's an opportunity. Now my church becomes visible in the community. It's a place that people will come.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not trying to baptize them. We just want to meet their needs.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
in that sense, it would change. Go ahead.
okay, so let me follow up with one more question. So then, with meeting the needs of the community, it takes money, Pastor Jules. That takes money. It takes resources. And this pandemic has caused our churches, to have to reevaluate their budgets. Our conferences have to reevaluate them. Nobody's hiring right now. Praise Jesus, nobody's getting fired yet. But that takes resources. And if our churches, especially for smaller churches, if they've already have limited budgets, then how can they be a meaningful presence in the community under these conditions and really be helpful?
I think, and I say this as one who loves our church,
Mm-hmm.
I say this, I think the way our structure is built and the movement of monies out of the local church, 100% of the tithe leaves the local church.
Mm-hmm.
And the local church does not benefit in any way from from the tithe.
Mm-hmm.
My church, we gave $1 million in tithe last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we struggle to pay our bills
Mm-hmm.
because the way the monies are allocated and the general conference gets a portion, everybody gets a portion except the local church where the money originated.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing the tithe does for us is it pays a pastor's salary. Well,
Yeah.
my church gave $1 million plus. My salary is not $1 million.
Right.
And I'm not saying we should not send the monies.
Yeah.
I'm saying if we don't, as a church, it may happen after I'm dead and gone, after I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't revisit the allocation of monies
Mm-hmm.
to ministry resources at the local level,
Mm-hmm.
our church will be in bigger trouble than we are today. Because you are spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the money?
Mm-hmm.
We're struggling to pay our mortgage, our light bill, our gas bill. Where are we getting money to do things in the community?
Mm-hmm.
It's sad that where the money originates,
Mm-hmm.
everybody gets a portion except where the money comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have said it in places where I thought I had influence, but nothing has been done. And before I said it, others have said it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're retired and gone. I'll be retired and gone, and it'll be the same. So the challenge is,
Mm-hmm.
it's a systemic issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an issue of theology.
Mm.
It's an issue of ecclesiology.
Mm.
It's what the church has decided where the money should go. It's not God.
Mm-hmm. That's deep. Man. Yep, that I have nothing, I have no comeback for that. That's the truth.
And it's something we have prayed about. And
Yeah.
I hope and pray the day will come when our church
Mm-hmm.
in its governance will look into thinking about the local congregation.
Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, I guess we just work with what we have.
You work with what you have and you make yourself, listen, I've been doing it all these years because I never had, I've had to build bricks without straw.
Mm-hmm.
What I've always done is try to do the things that I can do without money. And the monies that we had, we used it.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever there's a funeral in the community, somebody dies,
Mm-hmm.
I have what I've established in my church, a caring committee.
Mm-hmm.
I have a chairperson.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, anytime we know of someone who dies in the community, they're not Adventist,
Mm-hmm.
my church goes by.
Mm-hmm.
We offer the services of our church if they don't have a local church,
Mm-hmm.
free of charge,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can come and have their funeral service at our church.
Mm-hmm.
We offer to everybody who wants to have their baby blessed at my church, whether the baby's born out of wedlock or not, we bless those babies in our church. We do those things for the community.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Labor Day party in our church lot. We invite the community to come. We just want to be friends with them. We can't build any houses for them. We don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
But we make ourselves friendly and available to them.
Mm-hmm.
In times of need, in times of sadness, in times of joy. We do those things.
Mm-hmm. That's what's up.
You got to find a way to do something so that people know you care about them.
Yeah. So don't just complain. Do something. Be about
Do
something.
something.
Yeah.
Do something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Pastor Jules, I want to thank you for your time. You gave some good food for thought.
But Pastor,
Yes.
you're great. You're great at this.
Oh, thank you.
That's probably one of your callings.
Oh, well.
Excellent interviewer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, you are. You are. And keep it up. Don't stop with this when COVID-19 is over. Keep doing this.
I shall.
Yeah. Yeah.